Hey, welcome back guys to episode 2. Weather is not so good, so you can probably hear the doors banging, kind of crappy outside, but we got a lot of cool stuff going on. We got the White Ranger here still. We're gonna do a torque converter change on it and get it back on the dyno. We got my personal black Camaro in play. We're getting that thing back together and getting that on the dyno. We got Chris Gardner's truck here, mountain fiberglass, stuff like that on it, getting a windshield in it. Still got a bunch of stuff going on the 49 Willys all-wheel drive, the 65 F-100 and the Datsun 510. And we have the white 64 Chevelle back from wiring. So we're also gonna put fluids, get that thing fired up and on the dyno as well.
So we got the F-100 over here. Since the last time you guys did see this, we went ahead and cut the access panel to get in the back of the supercharger. Got the mid plate mounted and tabbed and welded and ready to go. We went ahead and pulled the motor and trans out of it just so we can go ahead and finish up welding and all that stuff. At that point, we started pulling the motor out and realized that we can't actually get it out that easily. Rob made the executive decision to cut the front of this truck off. So we went ahead, cut the whole front fascia off of it, the whole core support. Got the tubes cut out so we can go ahead and start putting it back on there. Getting some base plates made on the frame horns at the very bottom. Get the bottom of it mounted, and then at the very top we're gonna have tube clamps to go ahead and get back together. But at that point, yeah, we are tearing it apart and put back together now. The access panel is double walled, so we had cut out the speed roll and made the interior panel and the exterior panel. So when the motor is in there, you can still get to the back of the supercharger. Right now, gonna start making the plates to mount the bottom of the core support and then get that mounted. And then we're gonna go ahead and figure out from that point, tube connectors up here and blend that all out and everything like that. So that's today's chore, is getting it back on there really. And then, yeah, no, that's where we're at right now.
So right now we're mounting the cowl, added clearance, basically everything. And right now we're gonna run just 2 Zeus tabs on either side because this isn't gonna flap around really at all. So we're just gonna run 2 so that he's able to remove it super easily so he can access his brake reservoir and fill it if he needs to. So far we've got the front fenders mounted, we made these hoops, got tubing in here to catch the back of these guys. These are only sticking out because I haven't drilled them all the way yet. Back fenders are mounted, we got the taillights mounted. Next we're gonna do the hood pins, and we're doing the headlight bezel and the grill, that's what it is. Mount the grill, mount the headlights. Then we got a piece of trim that we're gonna mount on the top, it's a piece of chrome trim to kind of tie it all together. And then that's basically it for this truck, and then it goes back to the customer. And then we have to put the light bar on. I forgot about the light bar. We're gonna have to cut slots in the roof so that the guy can, we can mount it to the cage so it's nice and sturdy. Make it look super, super clean. He's got a brand new light bar sitting over there in the corner, just on the bottom of the floor. That'd be basically it for his truck.
I'm doing a fuel filler for the 49 Willys pickup. It's in a very, very tight space, needs to go both directions, so it's been quite a piece to make.
It's just crazy to think about how long I've had this car. I've had it, I think I bought it in '92 and just did a big burnout in front of my old house and took it back in the shop and cut it up. Started tubbing it. I wanted a tubbed out car for some reason. I don't know why I did back then, but I think maybe it was just cool to have big steamroller tires tucked up underneath the back. I wanted a 68 or 69 Camaro more than anything, but you know, when you're young and don't have a lot of extra expendable money, it's kind of hard to, you know, obtain one of those. They were pretty much just, I mean, they're still expensive now, but I feel like the prices have come down a little bit, but I just couldn't afford one. So I ended up purchasing this for a smoking deal and just turned it into what I wanted it to be. And then we started doing a little bit of street racing and just playing with it more and more, got more serious. I think the first engine was like 450 horsepower. It wasn't really that fast. And it's funny what you learn, you know, you think it's fast, then you go to the track and it runs at 1250 and you're like, okay, it's pretty slow. So it's a good learning lesson. But anyways, yeah, so ended up getting a different engine or building a different engine for it, and it just snowballed from there. Just kept getting faster and faster. And so the last time we had it at the track was 2014, so it's been in storage for a long time. But it ran 890s consistently, so at 150, 151 miles an hour. So now, I don't know, we're hoping to go like 850s, 840s with it. Hopefully about 400 more horsepower. We'll see what happens. And we're shaving some weight off of it too, so obviously moving less mass equals going quicker, so should be fun. So right now just buttoning up the engine, getting it ready to fire. Spark plug wires, putting spark plugs in, got to hook up the radiator, get the carburetor on, It's been sitting long enough that all the lines got replaced. Every steel braided line got replaced. The neoprene lines, when they sit for a while, they'll end up leaking. So especially if you put fuel in them and then get air in the lines after that, if they're just sitting around. So they deteriorate for some reason. Probably some of the stuff that we have in the fuel nowadays. So just buttoning it up. Like I said, we'll get the carburetor on, get the radiator, finish button up, get fluids in it, and get it fired up. And then we'll get it on the dyno, and we'll tune it on the engine first, get it running perfectly on the engine. Then we'll start bringing nitrous in. I was running a 350 shot before, but we're gonna run a 500 shot this time. So, and then some of the changes to the engine, pretty much same camshaft profile, gas ported pistons this time, lower tension ring pack, vacuum pump, T&D shaft mount rockers. So that's pretty much the major changes that we made. So I'm gonna run open header now, since I'm not running around on the street. We'll do open header. I just didn't want to build another exhaust system for this chassis, and so if we do end up going 850s or quicker, it'll force my hand to re-chassis the car, and so we'll do the car out of chromoly, and then I'll probably build an exhaust system for that chassis. So I just didn't want to build another one for this one if we're only going to be running this for about a year, I would imagine. One of the cool things about this car is has been a huge learning curve for me. It's got a first of minis, first exhaust system I've ever built, first headers I've ever built, first radiator fan shroud setup, first breather box, which we got rid of that because we have the vacuum pump on it now, so we have a different breather over there. But I just learned a lot, building this car. This is the whole car that actually got me started doing everything. Building this car and tubbing it out and putting a cage in it and the engine and stuff back in '93, and then started driving around on the street and started doing a little bit of street racing with it, and people just started asking me. They liked my work, so they said, hey, can you build me a cage, or hey, can you build exhaust, or can you do this? And it just kind of snowballed. It's kind of cool for a kid that didn't have a lot of direction and wasn't sure what he was going to do with his life. So we have the 64 Chevelle on the dyno finally. We've been waiting quite a while to get this get to this point, actually. We're super excited about it. So the 64 Chevelle has a GM crate package. So we bought the engine and transmission as a package from GM Performance. Has the 525 horse LS3 with the 4L70 transmission. So it's advertised at 525 horsepower. So when we're on the dyno, we won't see 525 to the wheels. And I know some people may not know the difference. So this engine sold at 525 brake horsepower, which means that's how much horsepower the engine alone has at the flywheel. Then we have parasitic loss. So when we put it on the chassis dyno and we're spinning the rollers with the tires, all that drivetrain, so the transmission has a pump in it, plus all the bearings and everything to turn the transmission, the rear end with the gears and the bearings and stuff in the rear end. And then on the engine, we have all the accessory drives like the water pump, the power steering pump, and the alternator. They all rob horsepower. So that's what parasitic loss is. And so some vehicles with different transmissions versus, automatic robs more horsepower. We have manual transmissions that rob less. So you could expect like a 20% to a 35% parasitic loss. On the Ranger, we've dynoed the engine by itself and then put the truck on the chassis dyno, and we have 38% parasitic loss, which I never thought it would be that high. So it's kind of amazing to me that it is. So this thing making 525 brake horsepower, probably going to be in the 370 to 400 horsepower range to the wheels. So just something that you may or may not know. Just wanted to go over that. So the 64 Chevelle engine package, 525 horsepower LS3 from GM Performance. Our dual K&N air filter system. So we have 2 flat air filters here. And then we built this intake system here. So we use vibrant clamps, super easy to get off. We didn't have enough room to put the vibrant clamp here. So plus, we wanted a little bit of movability right here, a little bit of flex. So we have a silicone hose with stainless steel T-bolt clamps here. GM package comes with everything, the drive system. So it has the alternator already on the engine, the water pump, the AC compressor, and the power steering pump on the engine. This thing has power rack and pinion steering system. Our custom headers, everything powder coated, and all our ceramic coating is done by Young Gun Exhaust down in Rancho Cucamonga, or Young Gun Performance Coatings. And then all the rest of the coating is done by our local shop, Extreme Performance, Extreme Powder Coating. This car's a driver, so we didn't make it ultra show quality, just very, very nice and clean and simple. So we built nice inner fender wells, we built pockets for the billet hood hinges from Eddie Motorsports. We didn't dress the engine with a bunch of crazy stuff. We just kept it very simple. Probably the most extravagant thing is the air filter setup and the intake setup on this. And then we have a really nice panel that closes all this out right here. We'll probably have pictures of that on later today, but it's off just so we can keep checking fluids on the dyno and just make sure everything's happy before we put that piece on, because it does cover the radiator cap to hide that. I've noticed is this is the original core support, and I don't know why we really didn't notice too much upon assembly, but we have some little dings right here. So let's build some closeout panels right here. Okay. And just capture all the way to the back edge of this thing, and it'll just cover all this. Yeah, just like we did on Ken's car. Yeah, exactly. All right. We'll just come in, wrap around this area right here.
Yep. Open up here for the...
Very good. I don't normally use that long of an extension, but I want to make sure I'm way far away from the paint and the barrel of the wheel on this thing. This for lug nuts, you get a lot of leverage. This is what you tighten lug nuts with. That's for valve covers. All right, it's the opposite, but either way. Yeah, as soon as we get this thing dyno tuned and everything's running correctly, which we're not far from it now, we drop it off at upholstery, and then Jose does his magic on all the upholstery, and we're pretty much done. A couple little checks and a little bit of test driving here and there, and we'll start taking it to shows, and he'll be able to drive it around and have some fun with it. It's gonna be good. Excited about this build. Yeah, so earlier, the transmission wasn't shifting. The terminator tells it shift points. We could also manually shift it, but neither were working. Turns out it was just a cannon plug connector. We just disconnected it, reconnected it, it's working fine. So we just had a slight connection problem. That's the sound of our people. That's a happy sound. Okay, so what we have going on here is not a clean tact signal. That's what all those squiggly lines are. Usually our graph is just nice and smooth. So that mess that looks like a 4-year-old scribbled on our screen there is just an unhappy tact signal. And we have trouble on the LS engines picking up a good tact signal. Sometimes we get it good and sometimes we don't. You see just on these first two pulls, we're very close to my guess on horsepower to the wheels. 390.35, or 397.23. being a 525 horse engine. Our torque over here looks like 312 first pull, 380 on the second pull.
340.
Oh, I'm sorry, 340. Thank you. I'm blind. But yeah, pretty close to what I thought it was going to be. So we're going to switch to wheel speed on this graph so that we can, yeah.
There's wheel speed for you right there.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So the peaks and valleys sometimes are shifts. I don't know why we have that many. So we'll do another pull and see if that cleans up. Okay, so last time, our last episode, this was not here. This is my good buddy Chris Gardner from Maximum Transmission and Bowtie Overdrive. They do all our transmission stuff, so we really don't have any time to take on new projects right now. But when a guy hooks you up on transmission stuff and does you a ton of favor, you gotta reciprocate, you know, you gotta pay it forward. So we're mounting fiberglass on this thing, putting a windshield in it. It didn't have the lower portion. Someone had cut this off, the lower portion that holds the windshield, so we had to make another one of those. And so we're just trying to make it look like a truck instead of a truggy without fiberglass on it. So we're just about done with that, putting a light bar on the top and grill, headlights, stuff like that. This thing will be out of here. I'm not sure who built the truck. I did hear it coming down the hill by the Joshua Inn the other day though, before he brought it to me, and got a pretty nasty small block in it. I'm not sure how much horsepower it's making, but it sounds healthy. 49 Willys. Like I said, these two are our flagship trucks we're building right now. But the Willys, what we're doing now is we're out of real estate as usual on these type of builds, trying to shove 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. So we're just about done with the interior. We had to put the race radio and the intercom on the roof because there's just no more room in the dash. So this square that you can kind of see right here, I'm not sure if you can see it. Let me turn this light on for you. Actually, this isn't my light, so I'm not sure how you turn this one on, but there we go. So there'll be an iPad right here that you can use for navigation and whatever else you need to use it for. But the mount we're using is out of like a Cessna airplane, so it just slides in, spring loads, clips in, clips to the charging port as you slide it in, so it'll always be charged up. And then the two Holley LCQ screens, I think last episode we didn't have these in, we just had it kind of drawn out where it was going to be. So the LCQ screens are in and done. The steering wheel's off, but we got the paddle shift installed. Everything pretty much mocked up to just about be done with the interior other than the doors. And then obviously all this aluminum paneling comes out and it'll get wrapped in leather, or I'm not sure exactly what the customer wants to do, what kind of material, but usually we do leather or suede or something like that. So, and then we'll go on to the doors. We're actually, this these old Willys trucks have a wind wing here. So in the door, we're going to eliminate the wind wing, do a one-piece rear window, but this hinge piece comes inside the door. So we're actually going to have to modify the upper hinge to clear the window. That's going to be fun. I don't know, the kind of challenging stuff like that is what makes it cool in my opinion. But yeah, so that's kind of where we are on this thing. As soon as we're done with the door, that wraps up the cab portion of it, and then we'll get the engine back in and we'll start plumbing this thing. We're just about done with all the coolant plumbing, so we still have the trans lines are done as well, sorry. So we have the fuel system to plumb, the power steering system to plumb, water to air intercooler to plumb, and the AC stuff, the air conditioning stuff. So once all that's plumbed, then we'll start doing the bed sides, the hood, the fender, the rest of the body work, and then we can disassemble and go to paint. So sounds easy, but it's a lengthy process, so lots to do still. And then on the 65 F-100, because we switched to a supercharged engine, we needed access to the back, so we actually cut out the portion underneath the dash in the center to make an access panel so that we can access whatever we need. The mid-mount, the trans, it's always very difficult to get when you push the engine super far back and put a supercharger on it. So now we'll be able to gain access to the upper bolt of the bell housing and the transmission mid-mount, which also, because of the supercharged engine, we had to raise this. I think last episode this was in, but the back section of the cowl, that piece is just tacked in there right now just to make room for the supercharger. We'll weld all that up. And then this was all connected, so we cut all this off. Now we're gonna make this section removable. The cool thing about all this front section up here is holds the radiator, it will hold the intercooler, the AC condenser, the grill, but it's not structural as far as where the shocks mount or that portion of the chassis. Our billet beam ends, we 3D printed our first version. It'll actually hold the uniballs, the snout, the bolt-on snout, so we can put the hub on, we can put it on here, cycle, make sure all that's gonna clear, and if everything looks good, then we'll go into production with that. We just didn't want to spend a bunch of money on 4340 chunks of, billet, have it machined and have it not work. So we'll check with the 3D printing first, and then if it's good, we'll proceed. The Datsun 510, the engine is out. Crawford Performance finished the short block for us. The engine is at Powered by RPM in Huntington Beach. We should be looking at around, he just did one that made the same combination I'm doing with the 2.5. It's not an EJ, it's a FA. You have to excuse me, I don't know a ton about Subaru stuff, and I'm just learning a bunch about their engine stuff, but I think it's a newer version of the 2.5. I think they made 616 to the wheels with that, so that's gonna be super fun. All-wheel drive, under 2,000 pounds, or max weight 2,000 pounds. So now that we have the engine out, we'll pull the trans out. The STI trans should be hitting us any day now, the newer R180 diff out of the STI. So we'll pull this stuff out of the way, we'll start welding the front portion of the chassis, and then we'll start hanging the rear differential and do rear suspension, weld that portion of the chassis up. By then the engine should be back. We'll get the engine in, trans in, start building firewall, start doing turbo plumbing, piping, intercooler piping, things like that. One interesting thing about this car, we actually have the engine pushed back 2 inches versus what the normal Subaru platform would be. So, and even that being said, the front fender, hood line, and factory valance underneath the, the front of the grill is right up against the pulley almost. So we'll probably build some sort of a splitter bumper system that comes out, and we can do a water to air intercooler in that section right there. So scratching our heads on that one a little bit, but we'll figure it out. We always do. And then we have the 64 Chevelle got back from Jack's Motorsports. He finished wiring everything. Marty's working on it right now, getting all the fluids in it. We'll bleed the brakes, gear oil, trans fluid, coolant, engine oil, stuff like that. The shifter cable needed to be installed. We didn't drill the firewall. We wanted to wait till all the wiring was done so that we make sure we clear that if it's in the way of anything like the e-brake that's underneath it, things like that. And then we needed to put an air temp sensor in the intake manifold, or the intake air inlet manifold. So, and the reason I call it that a manifold is we actually have 2 air filter systems. I think last time, was this car here? I don't think it was here the last episode. So, but we have 2 air filters, and then we have like a ram horn piece that comes here. So you can't use a MAF off one side or the other. So we at least wanted to have an air temp sensor in that. So we just needed to disassemble all that, get it stripped because it was powder coated. We'll weld the bung in for the air temp sensor, and then since we had it apart and we were going to strip it, we also decided we'll do vibrant clamps on it instead of silicone hoses with stainless steel T-band clamps. It'll just clean it up and make disassembly and reassembly a breeze. Just make it a lot easier and more friendly to work on. We can fire it up without that and just make sure it lights off and everything works. So, but as soon as it's running, we'll put it on the dyno. We'll get it tuned, and then it'll be off to upholstery, and then this thing will be wrapped up. Excited about this one. It's a nice one. So we need to capture some of the chassis underneath. And then Gordon's 1,000 horsepower Ranger. Last tuning session on the dyno. We were disappointed. Didn't make the horsepower numbers we wanted, but it's because we're pushing through the converter. So come to find out, the converter that we had when we got the truck can't handle the horsepower that this thing's making. So Chris Gardner at Maximum Transmission, he ordered us a billet converter for this. We'll get that thing installed. We'll get it back on the dyno. We'll tune with that converter. We'll do some street tuning, and then this thing's ready to leave us. So get in Gordon's hands, and we'll do some cool filming in the desert. All right, we're wrapping it up today. Super good to have you with us. Very excited about the future progress for next episode. We're gonna get back to it and get a bunch done so that we have a bunch of content to show you and a bunch of progress to show you. Throw some comments at me. I really enjoy answering people's comments, answering questions, good or bad. It's open to interpretation, so that's fine as well. If you don't like what we do, let me know. If you want me to change something, maybe I'll take it under advisement. Probably not, but whatever, it is what it is. So if you got questions, like I said, happy to answer them. Happy to get more in detail with people if people need that kind of stuff from us. If you have questions about anything in particular, happy to answer. So